Right. As the hypnotist would say, you're back in the room. Colonel Macgregor, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very, very sought after. Um, we're going to talk about probably one of the most difficult subjects, and it's not difficult for you and I to talk about, but the reason it's so difficult is most people have no idea what's going on. And we're going to talk about why they don't know what's really going on and why they don't understand it. But before we do that, you're so popular. Can you just tell our audience where they can find you, please?
Well, there are a couple of places that you should look. One is obviously my Substack. It's called MacGregor Warrior Diplomacy. And I think you'll find what's there very interesting. I've posted a lot of things that have been written over the last few years. One, of course, is the paper that I wrote at the urging of RFK Jr., who was running for president at the time, because I supported him. And we would have these long discussions about what do we do with the military establishment, what makes sense strategically, and so forth. And so he said, look, you've got to write this up. So I did. Then he turned around to me and he said, after he joined the Trump administration, or he joined the Trump campaign, he said later on, well, would you mind if I distributed this paper to members of the Trump campaign? And this is right after the election had been held and Trump had won. I said, of course not. And so he did. And they all looked at this, and some of them thought it was interesting. And guess what? Nothing happened because everything that's been going on is the antithesis of what had been written in there. Now, maybe that's going to change in the near future for various reasons. We can talk about that later. But so I think you'll find a lot of the material in there. It's very contemporary. It's very recent. I've got a new piece coming out next week, Judgment Day for President Trump's Iran war. And I think you'll find that interesting. But some of these other documents, if you join, go through these, because they will, if you're one of these people that is completely confused and you don't believe anything anybody says, well, go back to the pub and have a drink. But if you are interested in knowing that there is another world out there and there are other views and we're not all crazy, then, you should look at the Substack. I've also got a YouTube channel that's right under my name, Douglas Macgregor. And then finally, I think the other place to look for me is the National Conversation. And the name of that website is thenationalconversation.org, O-R-G. Very important. And you'll see what we're trying to do. We want to start a third movement that we hope will become a party. And the good news for us is there are a lot of people in the United States who have had it with the Democrats and the Republicans. They finally figured out it doesn't make any difference who you vote.
No, it's the same.
You get the same bad outcome. So anyhow, so that's that.
Thank you. And those three links will be in the description of the video afterwards. And just for viewers, really, really, really important, when you watch Colonel Macgregor on his YouTube channel, please subscribe and like each video. It sounds really petty, but it does actually improve the ratings and the algorithm. It just pushes the video along. And Colonel Macgregor's got a big audience, but you're still new to it, relatively speaking. Yes. So every little helps, as the supermarket ads over here say on the TV.
Everything is, as Benny Hill used to say, 1p off.
Yeah, he was very good.
I really missed him. He had a good sense of humor.
Yeah, it was good. It was very good. Showing my age now, Benny Hill. So the $1 million question. So the reason I've picked the subject, why did Putin invade Ukraine? Most of the people that follow me are just normal working people, families. Are they engaged in politics? Are they engaged in the bubble? No. They just looking after their families, working hard, and just trying to make ends meet. But they do follow me on social media, and I do have a very, very good reach. I'm very, very lucky. You won't know this, Colonel, but I won a major case some years ago against the terrorism police. I won every case. It was debated in Parliament, and everything, and the court said that everything that I said could be said, and it was and the irony is my defense in court was reasonableness. Did I behave reasonably? That was my only defense.
Yeah.
Did the things that I said, was I reasonable? And the court found yes. It was debated in Parliament. Some of my videos have had 1.5 million views. So, but my this channel's not monetized. I don't make any money from this. I do this because it's the right thing to do. I want to speak to the right people and get the right messages out there. And obviously, this is why you're here. And without bigging you up too much, Colonel, as George Galloway says about you, he's a friend of mine. You should be the president. He says that. He says that.
Well, George Galloway's lucky to be alive.
I know. I know.
With everything that's been thrown at that man.
Yeah. No. And his heart's in the right place. It really is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So, Colonel, addressing the question. So,
you can call me Doug or Douglas. You don't have.
Yeah, you always say that. No.
You know.
I just feel I should out of respect.
Oh, all right.
I could say doctor. He does have a PhD in military history. I know he doesn't like people knowing that. He's too modest.
No, it's not a PhD in history. It's political science, but
political sciences.
But when you deal with the Germans, everything is Herr Oberst Doktor, so and so. So they keep repeating as Colonel Doctor so and so. Colonel Doctor gets crazy, and if you tell them to use your first name, of course, that's out of the question. The Germans are too formal for that. But anyhow, I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. So, Colonel, start kicking off. Why did Putin invade Ukraine? Because I would almost guarantee that the majority of the British public would say, "Well, he's evil, he's bad, he's Putin," and he invaded Ukraine for one reason, because he could.
Yeah, great.
No pressure.
Well, I have a British friend who says, "Well, Douglas, he's not exactly a club able person." So I always thought that was rather interesting. Putin is not a club able person.
No.
Oh, Lord. Sometimes I think JFC Fuller is still alive and still defining what it means to be British. Maybe we'd be better off. But anyhow, I don't know what to say. I know the Russian structure and its political figures differently from most people in Great Britain, and certainly different from many people on the Hill. Mm-hmm. We have a group of people that are legacies of the Cold War, and they have done everything in their power to create the illusion that we are dealing with some restoration of Stalin and Stalin's regime, and that Putin, because of his service in the KGB, the secret police, as we call it, exemplifies everything that's wrong with Russia. In reality, and this is something that I discovered when I began when I said international relations or political science, most of my work is focused on, as I tell people, Russians and Germans. And it became very clear to me in a very short period of time, talking to large numbers of people from those countries, that the KGB officers who had traveled outside the Soviet Union were, on the whole, the best educated, the most thoughtful, and frankly, the most critical of communism. Now, people don't seem to understand that, but it's true. If I have a friend who was in the GRU, and he said, as soon as you travel outside of the Soviet Union, you can't go back and unsee everything.
No, you can't unlearn it. No, of course.
Yeah, so they all got back and they discovered this doesn't make any sense. And that's why Putin once said, anybody who does not feel a tinge of sadness at the fall of the Soviet Union has no heart. Anyone who wants to see a restoration of the Soviet Union has no brain. Now, that's Vladimir Putin, and he's right. And if I were to describe him, I would describe him as a person who has one foot in Tsarist Russia, as most Russians do, frankly, and another foot in the sort of latter stages of the decrepit and decayed Soviet Union. We're all products of our experience, and he's part of that. I grew up in the age of Eisenhower. Stop and think about that. And he has always been my lifelong image of what a president really should be. And I saw lots of presidents since then, and I've never seen anybody that I thought was as competent and capable as Eisenhower. Now, that doesn't mean that I live there permanently, but I'm just making an observation. So I think with Putin, you have to understand this is a well-educated man. He does understand economics too. And he's handled this very problematic country called Russia very, very well. And if you're a Russian, whatever you don't like about him, and everybody doesn't like something about someone, he has, I think, right now an approval rating of about 82%, which is certainly a hell of a lot better than Starmer and our friend. But if you were to look at this objectively, you would conclude no one has done more to improve the standard of living in Russia, to bring about peace in Russia and with Russia's neighbors. However, you are also not a fool. You know the history of Russia, which means you know the history of Ukraine. And what happened was something that he feared and many of us anticipated, and that was with this expansion of NATO, we would try to create adjoining peninsulas of hostility to Russia, because the people who were in charge, certainly in the late 90s and the early part of this century, were part of this anti-Russian club. Now, we can attribute that to many different things. Some of these people had ancestors, ethnic connections back to Russia and Ukraine. They had reasons for hatred of Russians, reasons for hatred of Orthodox Christianity, which is unfortunate because in the United States, we try to normally divorce ourselves from the past. In other words, I'm sure my ancestors had lots of nasty things to think about lots of people, but I'm under no obligation to adopt those views.
Yeah, of course.
And there's no reason why anybody today living in the United States, born in the United States, should try to rectify whatever the conditions were 100 years ago or 200 years ago. But the truth is, we have a lot of those. And they've had a major hand in misrepresenting Putin and demonizing Russia. But the Russians know the truth, and they understood that we, that is NATO and the United States, we were cultivating the emergence of a state in Ukraine that was fundamentally hostile to Russia. And it was not simply a matter of expanding NATO, because expanding NATO was kind of a Trojan horse for the kinds of things that people wanted to install in Russia. When I was involved with the Kosovo air campaign, I had someone very highly placed in the Clinton administration, I will not tell you his name, but he said, "Don't you realize this is the beginning of a democratic revolution that is going to sweep across Europe all the way to Russia? This is just the beginning. We're going to take all of these dictators down." And I looked at this man and I said, "Clearly, you're certifiable."
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't give a damn who's ruling in these places as long as they keep order and feed everybody and shelter everybody. I don't want the responsibility. If you remove these people, who the hell's going to take over?
And it's for the people of that nation to decide anyway, not you and I.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that unfold in Iraq after 2003. What in the hell are we doing? You know, and they knew nothing about the Arab world, nothing about its culture or people. Well, you have something similar going on with large numbers of people, many of whom have never been to Russia, never been to Eastern Europe. You know, I always go back to, I think it was the Foreign Secretary Gray in 1914, who decided to become this sort of powerful advocate for war with Germany, and admitted that he had rarely, if ever, visited the continent. He didn't know anything about people on the continental European side. So we have something similar. And I think there was a readiness to believe the worst. And there's some excuse for that. Look, Stalin and what he built and what his Bolshevik predecessors built was nothing more than a human destruction machine. I mean, there were no concentration camps. There was no concentration camp system in Germany before 1941. There was a camp system that absorbed and killed millions in the Soviet Union beginning in 2020 or 1921. So you have a, you know, one of the things that happened that I always thought was kind of amusing is in 1939, after the Germans took their piece of Poland and the Soviets had their piece of Poland, they had captured large numbers of people whom they considered to be criminals, communists, socialists, anarchists, and so forth. And so one of Himmler's men said, well, what do we do with them? Where do we put them? He said, we don't have anywhere to put them. And Himmler said, I have an idea. They called the NKVD. They said, we have many thousands of people that belong in prison. Can you accommodate them? Oh, easily. We have plenty of room. And so they turned over thousands of people to the Soviets. So there are reasons to harbor a certain amount of suspicion. And let's be frank, Germany went through fundamental denazification. You're not going to run into anybody in Germany that says, oh, yeah, Adolf, that was a great guy. We need to bring him back.
No.
But you will run into people who are very confused about what happened under Stalin today. So they never really went through a genuine de-Stalinization. But Putin understood that when he took over, and he had to make a decision. He said, we are already at a low point in our history in terms of self-worth, identity, culture, history, and so forth. The last thing we need to do right now is to tear down Russia. We have to build it up. We have to get people once again to be proud to be Russian and see Russia in a positive light. And so he kind of steered a mid-course halfway between total de-Sovietization or de-Stalinization and what I would call total, complete embrace of liberal democracy, which turns out to be an exercise in self-flagellation, as you've discovered in England. Tear down monuments, tear down people because we were imperfect 100 years ago. So I think he's done that very well. And excuse me, my limited experience tells me that the police over there, you could do a hell of a lot worse than the Russian police. And the Russian police are not nearly as corrupt as they once were. Let's put it that way. But Ukraine, on the other hand, has become this very chaotic criminal organization. All of this radical Nazism, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
And the majority of Ukrainians are not interested in it. I know that from personal experience. This is a crew in Kiev that if the Ukrainians could rise up and get rid of them, they would. And right now you can watch all the videos you want of Ukrainians beating back press gangs who are trying to take young men into vans and drive them to the front to be butchered.
Yeah, you will never see that on the main. You'll never see that on the BBC here.
No,
You'll never see that here. You'll never see that here.
And we think there are probably as many as 50,000 mercenaries in the ranks of the Ukrainian army. In other words, these are foreigners who are being paid to fight. Now, I don't know who's paying them, but I suspect it's a combination of you and us.
Yeah, MI6 heavily entrenched in Ukraine. Obviously, I'll happily tell you off camera, but who I speak to.
Yeah. And again, they think they're doing something good for Great Britain, I suppose, but I don't see how it
keeping us safe.
Yeah,
keeping us safe.
I don't see it. I see the exact opposite, frankly. And it's a tragedy. But there is good news. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't think this Ukrainian state is going to last much longer.
No.
It's being held together by foreign money and foreign equipment and foreign troops. And I think we're getting closer and closer to the point where the Russians are going to strike out and put an end to it. Now, having said that, I am surprised they haven't already done it. They have 3 concentrations of forces, one in the south that could easily cross the river, head south and take Odessa. Another large concentration moving from Sumy towards Chernigov, towards Kiev. That concentration could take Kiev without much trouble. And there's a third that nobody pays much attention to, and that is up in Belarusia, just north of Kiev. And that includes a force of between 20 and 30,000 North Koreans who have happily joined for the combat experience. None of these forces have ever really been exploited to their potential. And the real question is, how long do you wait? And I think that Putin, first and foremost, wants a good relationship with Europe because he wants to do business with Europe.
Of course. Wants to trade, of course.
And then secondly, I don't think he wants a war with NATO. He certainly doesn't want a war with us. He's deeply disappointed in Trump because Trump talked a great game and then ultimately did nothing, much as his predecessors. But he sees what's happening right now in Germany. And Germany is far and away to the Russians the most important state in Europe. And people forget that before, in 1914, when war broke out and the Russians tried to invade Prussia, Russia was Germany's #1 trading partner. And Germany was Russia's #1 trading partner. And in 1941, when the Germans invaded Russia, the Soviet Union was Germany's #1 trading partner, and Germany was the Soviet Union's #1 trading partner. So this, what people don't understand is that those two world wars were anomalies. They were not the rule for Europe at all. And this is an unnatural relationship between Germany and Russia. And Putin is watching carefully because you now have this Aliza Weidel who stands up, gives brilliant speeches in the Bundestag. I'm surprised they haven't killed her. They're so good. And she points to the obvious and she says, what is wrong with this government? It is destroying our country.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Point by point, she goes right down the list. And she and Rupert Lowe would have an excellent conversation because it's not just Rupert Lowe and Aliza Weidel, it's the French, it's the Swedes, it's the Danes, it's the Dutch, it's Italians and Spaniards. Everyone is in the same boat. And I think Putin has exercised a great deal of patience and restraint because he wants it to happen. He doesn't want to go in there. Why would you want to go into Ukraine and then end up with the responsibility to manage and administer Ukrainians? It's a catastrophe. He doesn't want to. In Moscow, people joke openly, can't we get the Poles to come back and take over Western Ukraine?
And they run it.
Because they say, well, we know how well that worked out. So, I think the British have got it wrong. I don't know how to correct it until you can get true freedom of information and freedom of speech. You must have access to alternative sources of information and media. And I don't think you have many, do you?
No. I mean, for example, you will never, ever see, which is what you've just said, is that the recruitment process within Ukraine is they literally have gangs and gangs and gangs or teams driving around in trucks and literally grabbing people off the street. A guy's walking his dog. He just doesn't come home that night. He disappears for 3 or 4 days training, sent to the front line to the meat grinder. It's absolutely shocking. They just don't show you that, it's absolutely awful. And then, the 2014 coup, the CIA coup in Ukraine. I mean, no one knows about that. I mean, people, Victoria Nuland has been caught on audio. Her phone was intercepted, and she and the American ambassador were actually choosing the next Ukraine leader. It's appalling. It's there's no democracy there when the Americans are choosing the next leader of Ukraine.
Well, she was also caught lying about the biolabs that we had placed.
Big time.
And those things were atrocious. And the kinds of things they were exploring in terms of genetic research to develop weapons that would kill Slavs was deeply, deeply disturbing to me. It should be disturbing to everyone in Britain.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of insanity needs to go away. But these are the kinds of people you're dealing with. That's your deep state. And they're like a bad case of VD. You can never get rid of them. They keep coming back.
No. I think one of the reasons when Joe Kent resigned and she carried on, I think he didn't say this, but I think he intimated. I might be wrong, and if I'm wrong, forgive me. I think he intimated that the reason she didn't resign and continued was because she wanted to finish that her investigation into the biolabs. Was it 120 or something like that? I mean, it's insane.
Well, I think Tulsi would have done it if she could have. And I'm surprised that she stayed as long as she did.
Yeah, me too.
But I'm very glad that she told the truth about the biolabs. And if you look carefully at all that material and you ask yourself, what would you have done had you been Vladimir Putin and understood what was happening there? I said I would have come close to nuking the place. I mean, it's that bad. So I don't know who will succeed him. There is some talk now about potential successors. I think he will manage his succession. I don't think it's going to erupt into civil war and a lot of violence at all. And that will come when he thinks it's time. And he's concerned not so much with himself, but preeminently with Russia. And that's why he has the support he does.
And the I wanted to ask you about the Rand Corporation, because one of the big instigators, your friends, Colonel. I know that's not true. I know that's not true.
They're not my friends.
No, I know. I was joking. I've been at the gym, but yeah, no. I mean, they created a report that basically said once the CIA goes in, topples the democratically elected government, installs their own puppet, which would have been Zelensky, and then they, as Biden said, bone-crushing sanctions on Putin and Russia would collapse very quickly, and it was just all nonsense. It's just a whole lot of nonsense.
But you have to understand what these institutes are like, these think tanks, as they call them, and I call them advocacy tanks. Because really, they are always in the market looking for federal money, wherever they can get it for whatever the federal agent wants it. And what they do is that they say, all right, you want us to make a study or conduct a study about the following 5 things in this area and what the potentialities are. We'll be happy to do that. And it's going to cost, we think, well, what do you want? Well, look, I think this is going to cost about $150,000. Really? Yeah, but it will. Okay, you got it. But they know when they start the study what the correct answer is. So you put the people on the study who are going to produce the answer that your client wants. This is not an execution or an exercise in objective assessment and analysis.
No, of course not.
It's like, I don't want to be too nasty, but let's put it this way: houses of prostitution are more honest.
No comment. But I mean, these organisations just have immense power and influence. I know you've explained the reasons why, because they're fixed, to all intents and purposes.
Well, the senators and the congressmen who are on committees, they actually assign tasks. We want a study that does the following. And one of the good organizations is the Congressional Research Office. They tend to provide a more balanced assessment of things than most. But if it's a piece of military equipment, if it's a new aircraft, a ship, whatever it is, you got to ask the question, first of all, who wants the study? And then you find out they sit on the Armed Services Committee or the Appropriations Committee, and the study is designed to justify something they want, something that they've put forward for legislative support. And it's an old game. And whenever you suggest, as I have and others, why don't we go outside the Washington Beltway? Is there anybody out near Seattle, Washington that could do this work? And of course, what? No, there's nobody else out there, which is nonsense. If you want to read all the terrible things about Russia and its leadership and how terrible the Russian military has performed and how incompetent they are, all you have to do is go to RUSI and you can read volumes on the same subject.
Incredible. And another aspect of all of the propaganda, people aren't aware of the Odessa massacre, where peaceful protesters, unarmed, were literally burnt alive.
Yes. Putin has announced, we know the people who did it. We have their names. We know where you are. And if they cross that river, those people have had it.
Yeah, they're in trouble.
They've already done some of this in eastern Ukraine. They know people who have committed terrible atrocities, and these people have been brought to judgment, summary judgment on the spot. Now, we can all sit around and say, well, this disturbs our sensibilities. But to be frank with you, there's more chance of judgment like that occurring on the spot than there will be if you go to any court of law, as you and I both know.
Well, I remember the night when the story broke about the potential biolabs in Ukraine. And George Galloway was on air, and I'm just listening as a member, interested member of the public. And George broke the story and said, but it's not fully confirmed. It's just breaking as we speak. I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that. It's not fully confirmed. And he put all the appropriate caveats in, which was the right thing to do. But he said, if this is true, this is huge, absolutely huge. And then the next day, all of the press were Kremlin lies, Putin lies, Kremlin propaganda, and the public believe it. Because my best friend says to me, my best friend says to me, he said, so the BBC don't know, Sky News and Murdoch's people don't know, Channel 4 don't know, but a plumber in North London knows. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And it's a, where'd you go with that?
Well,
the propaganda works.
We still have it here. The interesting part here is it tends to apply to people in my age group. In other words, the so-called boomers, those of us who were born in the 50s or very early 60s. This is the crowd that came on the planet after World War II. They're the ones that still turn on the mainstream television, and they say exactly what you just did. And I'll send a note off to a friend that served with me in the military. He's roughly my age. He said, well, Doug, I haven't seen that on Fox News.
Yeah.
I said, you never will.
No, never.
What else do you watch? And this is the tragedy. It's a huge tragedy because so many people are that way. However, once you get down to anybody under 50, I would say about 90% of the people I've run into under the age of 50 say, well, of course, that's nonsense. What did you expect? They go elsewhere for their news. And I think that's a blessing. Yeah,
no, of course. And Glenn, I'm not a massive fan of Glenn Beck, but he has done some great stuff. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, Tucker's sort of, taken over that mantle many moons ago. But when Zelensky, a lot of people won't know, how did Zelensky end up becoming the president? Well, apart from the coup and the CIA and the funding, he was funded, and I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Was it a chap called Kolomoisky?
Yes.
Was it Kolomoisky?
Now sitting in jail, as I understand it.
Yeah, he was
one of Russia's famous Jewish oligarchs.
Yeah.
And surprise, he picked a Jewish president for Ukraine. And then if you look around at some of the people that are closest to Zelensky, what do they turn out to be? This is very strange stuff. This is all supposed to be happening inside a country that is, what's the right word, permanently anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And the same government there is using all of these Nazi symbols. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are from Eastern Europe. Some of them are Jewish. And I say, what in the hell is going on here? And they say they're using these things to mobilize portions of the population. And it works. And I understand that. I said, but why are we supporting it?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense for us to support that crap.
No, of course not. But
I think the Germans are insane. What the hell are they supporting that nonsense for? They're not.
No. Well, it's Zionism, and it's Zionism. But Glenn Beck did a couple of shows. I actually thought it was brilliant, and he put the Trilby raincoat on, he put the hat on, and he became Columbo. Got his fake cigar, and he had all of the pictures of all the suspects.
Yeah.
And he piece by piece showed how Kolomoisky manipulated the political framework to create Zelensky as the servant for the people, creating a very popular TV show, Servant of the People. So when the elections came, Zelensky was the servant of the people. He was the man that was reasonable, that said the right thing, did the right thing. He's the man that you needed to vote. Very, very clever psychological warfare. Brilliant, in fact. Brilliant.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, he not only said the right things, the Ukrainian population, even the areas that had formerly voted against his predecessors, voted for him.
Yeah, of course.
Because the Ukrainians wanted nothing to do with the war against Russia.
No.
And it's sort of the same tragedy here in the United States. All sorts of people, I include myself in that column, went out and voted for Donald Trump because he said all the right things.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And what do you do? I mean, you believe it. And I certainly, during his first term, when I knew him slightly, he demonstrated to me pretty conclusively what he did not want. And one of the things he did not want was war with Iran. But then everything changed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times I've had this conversation with people. People, oh, Trump's being blackmailed. Is there dirt on Trump? One, I have no idea because obviously I'm not privy to the information. Do I personally believe that there's dirt on Trump? I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. However, do I believe he's being blackmailed? I personally always say no. And the reason for that is, if it's a really stupid example, but if I was blackmailing you for whatever reason, which is just ridiculous to even suggest, but I'm blackmailing you, so you're now going away and doing my bidding. Your behavior, you might go along and do my bidding, but you would behave in a certain way that would suggest that you were being reluctant in doing that. He's very joyful, I would suggest, and very happy to, as he says to Netanyahu with Gaza, get the job done and all this kind of stuff. He doesn't look like a man that's being blackmailed. He seems full on for the game. Personally, that's what I think.
Realize that he's now done a 180-degree turn. He's the exact opposite at this point. He made statements within the last 24 hours about the Israelis and saying, if you're trying to get one person, you can't justify destroying an entire apartment building just to kill one person. Well, Donald, that's been going on now.
For years.
Stop for years.
Yeah, for years.
What do you think you're dealing with? So whatever's happened, he has taken a 180-degree turn. And if you look at this agreement, there are a lot of people saying, well, this is unconditional surrender. It's our unconditional surrender. Well, he's had to come to terms with some realities. And I think his advisors have sat with him. I'm not sure his Zionist advisors have said this, but
no, I'm sure they haven't.
others have sat with him and said, look, we lost. We're defeated. And we are causing the world enormous misery by keeping this strait bottled up. We can't open it. The only way to get it open is for the Iranians to open it. The only way to persuade the Iranians to open it is to sign on to some of these conditions, whether we like it or not. And I think Donald Trump has finally said things here at home are bad. And if I don't do something about this economic catastrophe that we've created, it's going to get bad here. It's going to get worse. So I think he now has, a final and more thorough grasp of reality than he had in the past. I think in the past, he was willing to believe, well, Iran is just like every other Muslim country out there. This should be over relatively quickly. I think the Israelis are right. They can't stand to us. We really are the greatest power in the world. Look, you and I know, how many times did the British Army stand up with a handful of people and achieve victory when no one thought it was possible? And sometimes others have done it to the British. And it's being done to us. I think he's finally coming to terms with this. And I'll be frank with you, I'm worried the man could be assassinated.
And Tucker. I believe Tucker as well.
Yeah, but I'm really worried. I mean, this business of his turnaround is so dramatic.
I agree because you're absolutely right. I just can't comprehend. I just don't know whether it's real. I just don't know whether it's real. That's the problem, because he's
that's legitimate.
He's so inconsistent. Inconsistent. I want it to be real because I want all this to stop.
Yes.
What human wouldn't want all this nonsense, all this killing to stop? I mean, the senior people at NATO that I speak to believe that they're just buying time. This is going to continue.
Well, it may continue. And the way it may continue, I think this is probably likely, is that the Israelis will provoke the Iranians, and the Iranians will respond as they said they would. Now, now, the Israelis are shelling positions in Lebanon with artillery rounds. But if they repeat their previous performance and go in and heavily bomb, I think the Iranians will respond. And the whole thing will begin to unravel. The question then for Donald Trump is, are you going to respond to the Iranians? They may not have attacked us, but they attacked Israel. And I think he, under great pressure, will do that. But I don't think he will fully engage. I think what he'll try to do is say, look, we're going to go in there, we're going to help you this time. But if you're not going to honor this arrangement, we're out. And I think at that point, he'll try to get out. There is nothing for us to win out of this. There never
was.
And this whole thing is a legacy of 2 world wars. You go back to the First World War and the Second World War, and everything that emerges in the Middle East is a consequence of your and our interventions. It's all falling apart. It's going away. It has to. It's unnatural. And you see 2 great powers reemerging. One is Iran, and the other is Turkey.
Yeah.
They are the great powers. And they are going to decide what ultimately happens in that region. And Israel, which is really a product of our joint efforts to create, I'm not sure they're going to make it.
No. Well, Neftali Bennett's already said that after we've taken out Iran, Turkey's next. I mean, it's insane. I've said this to people. They don't be ridiculous. He said it on TV. It's just nuts. It's just absolutely nuts.
And the difference between the Iranians and the Turks is the Iranians will pulverize you and reduce your country to ruins, and the Turks will descend upon you like the Mongols and wipe you out. That's the difference. No, I think this state tragically has been led into destruction by Netanyahu and his gang.
Yeah.
And I'm not somebody who welcomes that. I've been to Israel several times. I think there are many positive things about Israel, and Israel was always in a position to make very positive contributions to the region and the world. But I think they've exhausted whatever good fortune they've had. They certainly cannot go out in public and use the victim card anymore.
No. These on a final note, I went to see there's a British he's brilliant, he's very, very good, British TV presenter, does a lot of stuff on the BBC, Jewish guy called Louis Theroux, has a very dry sense of humor and has a very, very unique way of putting a microphone in front of someone very senior in the KKK, asking them a difficult question and just letting them hang themselves. He's brilliant. I mean, he really, really is good. Everybody loves Louis Theroux. And he's just done a BBC documentary on the settlers. And they're just completely out of control and have been forever. And you know, I asked some questions at the little private screening, and he just said that the Israeli government officials just don't care what the world thinks. They just don't care. Because I said, you know, they're really lucky that the BBC isn't broadcasting that young children had their hands bound behind their backs, were put into pits, covered over with sand and bulldozed. And this is the testimony of, you know, Jewish American surgeons said this happened. But fortunately, or unfortunately, people don't get to hear that. You know, how can anyone allow that?
Well, there's a documentary called Shoah, all about the Holocaust. It's very interesting. You can read it as well as watch it. And there's this one particular incident that's recounted. And it was recounted, I think, by a Latvian who ultimately is in the Waffen-SS. And he was assigned to one of these killing squads. And they herded these Jews into a circle. And in the middle of the circle stood this elderly gentleman, and just in front of me, this little boy. And the little boy turned around and said, "Grandfather, what is going to happen?" And he said, "Do not worry, my son. God is watching what is happening today." Now, that Latvian immediately went to his superiors and said, "I'm out. I'm happy to fight communism. I'll fight the Russians forever, but I'm not going to kill these people." So they reassigned him. He ended up fighting the rest of the war, and that's another story. He survived.
Yeah. Good.
But the point is, that anecdote should be taught to every Israeli, not with the goal of instilling hatred and violence in them, but it should remind them that, yes, God is watching everything that's happening. Be very careful.
Well, as you know, the world has gone completely mad. Is that your time, sir?
I got to go. I go on in another 3 minutes.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Colonel, thank you very, very much indeed for your time.
Yeah.
If you want more Colonel Macgregor, I will put the links down to the three places that you can get more Colonel Macgregor when the video goes up tomorrow morning. Colonel, I just want to speak to you off camera for a second.
Okay.
But I'll stop the recording now, and I think we should still be in the room.